Hello, we're back. Season 2 of the TaAF Talks podcast is here. This is still the show that is all about influencing positive change and doing things differently. And I can hear you all thinking, has he still got the same host? Is it somebody new and better? Well, if I start by introducing him as, some people call him the space cowboy. Some people call him the gangster of love. And some people call him the world's greatest co-host. It's my man, my friend, Ken Massey.
Hello everybody. I've never heard any of those things before, and so if anyone's on the other side getting what those references are about, probably more funny to you than to me.
Fabulous. So, as we said, this is season 2. And obviously, like we always like to start things, we want to talk about what is it we want to get out of season 2, Ken, and why have we actually come back? And so actually I think I'll come over to you a little bit and talk about what are our success factors for season 2 of the podcast.
Well, I think, we've had a bit of a breakthrough. We did some podcasts through the early stages of COVID, but then we had a bit of a rest. And I think, for me, we've moved into a phase now where we feel like we've got some really applicable learning coming out of the local delivery pilot here in Pennine Lancashire Together Active Future. So we want to share some of the things that we're learning, as well as for us to capture a bit of a record of the stuff that's ongoing and how we're feeling about it. Obviously, we enjoy doing it. I think I enjoy doing it. And I think also as you reflect on the things that you're learning, that helps the learning to embed in me as well, and in you and those we're working with. So I think all of those things, and then for the audience, a success factor for those listening, for us, I think, hopefully is for you to understand a bit more about TaAF and the work that we're doing, and have some practical takeaways, some things that maybe you can apply in your work to kind of empower you to think about how you might lead change within the system.
Awesome. And actually that's a good reminder. We probably should just say, Together an Active Future and who we are as part of that. Because it has been a little while since we kind of did this. Yeah. So Together an Active Future is one of Sport England's local delivery pilots. We have a website, so I'd just suggest go and check that out at taaf.co.uk, I think it is, TAAF. Yeah. I'm the programme manager and creative lead because, why not create job titles that are meaningless? And and your title in TaAF is?
Lead for people and place.
There you go.
I'm one who asks the questions and doesn't do much of the work.
That is nicely put. Okay, so over to you, Ken, to talk about what we're going to cover today.
So today's podcast is all going to be about creative engagement, and that's been a real foundational piece of the work we've been doing here in Pennine, Lancashire. We've done podcasts on creative engagement before, but I think we started to develop a much more kind of a structure to it that people can think about and follow as they try to think about ways that they can more creatively engage or deepen engagement with communities, partners, colleagues, whatever that might be. So today we're going to run through some of the key steps of creative engagement, and hopefully that'll have some ways in which people can apply that in the things that they're doing too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're even being bold and brave enough at the moment to turn creative engagement into our own kind of skills sharing sessions that we've started to involve partners in, and we're really starting to kind of take that out there with lots of people. And it's a really exciting time, to be honest, to be kind of, like you said before, refining our own learning. We're always learning and improving and evolving these things. And the chance now to do that with really interesting partners and people from all over the place is quite an exciting time. And we know that today we're going to do a bit of a quick intro, if you like, a bit of a summary of some of the key things of creative engagement. But I think we intend to do almost like a bit of a learning video series, if you like, where we can get into a little bit more of each of the topics.
Yeah, absolutely. And today we're going to cover five themes.
Well, we will if you remember to actually do your job properly and follow the notes.
Yeah, so there's 5 themes. We're going to cover some or all of those. And those 5 themes are success factors, the look, the sound, the feel, designing out the barriers, commitment devices, and theme 5, key points and some hints and tips. So let's start with success factors. So we discussed that very quickly at the beginning of the podcast. What are success factors and why are they important when we're thinking about how to engage with people, communities, partners?
Well, I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here and just jump back to the creative engagement definition, if that's okay,
yeah,
to kind of set up what we're kind of talking about. So I think you talked there before about the engagement bit. So, I think people hear the words creative engagement and can sometimes worry about the creative people on the listening to the audio. So I'll be doing my quote fingers there. Talking about the creative bit rather than the engagement bit. And actually, I think what you said before is perfect. It's about creating something that really engages people, and ideally engages them to be interested or to contribute in a really meaningful way. And the creative bit really is almost just creativity is freedom, and creativity is thinking differently about things. And I think that's really the best way of kind of framing what it is. It's about those things. It's about finding value for you as well as your audience, and it's about creating really great experiences for people. And I think that sets up nicely then the success factors question, which you then kind of came on to. And success factors really are taking the time to really think about what is a great outcome, but not just for you and what you're trying to achieve, but for the audience or the people who are going to be receiving the information that you're trying to kind of get across. Because if you think about it, almost everything we do, the vast majority of the people involved in that experience aren't you. You know what I mean? So if you're running a session, 99% of those people aren't there for the thing that you want to do. They're there for value for them and for what they're trying to achieve. And so success factors is about capturing that value both for yourself, but also for them. And sometimes there might be another partner involved as well.
There's something I think really important about the empathy there, and trying to really put yourself in the other person's shoes to think, why would they come to this thing? And importantly, why would they then leave without feeling like almost potentially wasted their time or not got much out of it? And I think we have so many meetings, so many interactions, so many connections with people in the work that we're doing, particularly within the public sector. I think fairly meeting heavy in the public sector. And so, thinking about ways that can create real and deep engagement at a more human level with more emotion attached to it, I think is one fundamental way that we can really drive change. And thinking about that success on both sides, I agree, really important.
Yeah, and if you think about the why question, if you're working out value for everyone involved, you're far more likely to create something that creates a connection where people feel like I can contribute and share ideas. Because most of our work and all the public sector work is relying on people working together towards something. So do you know what I mean? So you've got to create that environment where you almost, if you like, creating a shared power dynamic, if you like. It's not there about your agenda. You're there as a collective group of people. And I think doing this really helps do that. And another why, I think you alluded to it there, is it's about showing people that you value their time as much as your own. And I think that's a really important point that people don't think about. That people who are there with you, it's their time as much as it's yours. And think about the value you put on what you do. Well, give them the same value for their time they're contributing.
You talked a bit about environment, and that probably brings us on to theme 2. You talked about creating an environment where people feel safe to contribute, to bring their thoughts and ideas on an equal footing to others. So our second theme, one of the key parts of creative engagement is what we talk about in terms of the look, the sound, and the feel. How's that emerged in TaAF, and what does that look like from your perspective?
I'm trying to think how it emerged in TaAF. I think firstly because we always, from the very start, have talked about the how, and knowing the how was about thinking about the experience that we wanted created, not only within our team, but which is where it started, the kind of experience we wanted our team to have, but then the people that were kind of connecting with us, and really the look, the sound, and feel is just about that. It's about, think about the experience that you want people to have, whether they're reading something you've created, whether they're part of an event that you've got. And really the look, the sound, and feel was just our way of trying to get people into a slightly different mindset. Well, if you did want something to look a certain way, then you've got to design something that gives that. Yeah. If you did want people to feel a certain way, you've got to design something to do that. And again, I think that kind of mindset applies to everything we're going to talk about today. Is the idea of capturing a success factor, or how you want people to feel, or how you want something to look. You then have to design something to do that. And if you take that time to capture it, your design is fundamentally different than it would have been had you not kind of done that thinking and that prep in the first place. And most of what we're going to talk about today is thinking, it's approach, and it's prep. It's not really actually the design of the thing itself. Knowing that if you get those things right, you'll fundamentally deliver something that's a miles better experience for people than it might have been had you not thought about those things.
And what are some examples perhaps of when we've thought about and talked about the look, the sound, the feel? What are some examples of things that you think perhaps really look and sound and feel engaging, and things perhaps that typically you've found are not so much that?
I mean, well, there's easy ones that I default to, and this is because I've got a background in the public sector and the NHS, and there's things that just stand out really easily. So, if most people would say, I want the thing that I'm doing to be interesting or engaging. So if you think about the look, have you ever gone to a meeting and seen an agenda that's got 10, 12, 15 points on it, and thought, great, I can't wait to get into this meeting. Or seen somebody open a presentation and you've seen they've got 20 or 30 PowerPoint slides. Just the look of that has put up immediate barriers between the experience that they're going to kind of create around them. And therefore, you're more than likely to do what we all do, because we're all humans. Somebody starts presenting to you, you sit back, you fold your arms a little bit, and actually then you're not really going to contribute meaningfully to the session. So there's easy stuff like that. And again, we're just going to look for one more. Just the way you dress informally. I mean, if you can. I mean, I know today that your wife's dressed you for the podcast. We've got the video going and stuff. So, you're looking perfect to be able to go out there and engage people in a way that hasn't created a barrier. Because you haven't done something that suggests I'm a different person to you. So I think the look of creating that thing where I'm a person just like you and we're going to chat about something that we can both relate to. I think the sound is, again, so it might just be something as simple as language, and just not wanting to speak in a way that kind of puts people off. This is really simple stuff. But if you think about it, and public sector, that doesn't have its own language. We've even done a podcast on language, actually, that you might want to go and check out from the last season. So really simple stuff like sound. But even sound, quite literally, if I walk into an venue and I don't know people and it's just kind of silence, that's quite an intimidating thing to walk into. So just thinking about creating some background noise, thinking about having somebody there welcoming people, letting them know it, all that thing is sound as well. I think those are great examples. It's all about removing those barriers.
And the private sector, you just touched on sound. If you would never walk into a shop or a restaurant where there's not music playing in the background, or even into events or whatever it might be. And I've thought a lot about sound, and you're right that actually silence is probably one of the most intimidating, scary things or a cacophony of people talking, and you're the one on the outside. So either way, both can be quite difficult to deal with.
And actually, as you just said that, I thought, and you can apply that in a couple of ways. So you can apply it to the event of silence, but also apply it to a meeting. If there's just one voice that's been talking 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the rest of those voices have switched off. And actually, you're not going to be using the experiences, the brains of people around there because they switched off. Because you've not thought about them as an audience. You've not thought about how you create an experience where people contribute. And then feel, so I mean, here's just a simple one. If when you're creating something or designing something or talk about something, you start to feel a bit bored yourself, that's exactly what the audience are going to be feeling as well. So stop yourself and think, I just bored myself. How can I think about doing that differently? And again, feel, it is all about that. And we'll make it a bit about events for this thing. But actually, I'm going to refer to a document that me and you were lucky enough to work on with some of your amazing colleagues from Rosendale. And they really talked about creating this document that we wanted everyone to kind of fit and feel if it needed to be informal. It needed to feel like people could own it. It needed to feel like something different to what had been done before. And because we captured this in our prep, it meant the thing that we then all worked together on creating was fundamentally different because we stuck to the look, the sound, the feel kind of elements that we kind of identified.
And when we talk about feel, I mean, there's a quote, isn't there, and I'll probably hash this to death, but something like people forget the things that you say and the things that you tell them and the things that they hear, but they'll probably never forget the way that they feel. And I think we probably underplay the importance of emotion and feelings when we think about our interactions in a work setting, but they're really important if we want to change stuff.
Absolutely.
If we want to lead to change.
And I know you're moving us on, but I think look, the sound feel is going to set up what we're going to talk about in a little minute, which is around removing the barriers for people, designing them out before they experience them. And again, that bit of the feeling. If I walk into an event that I didn't know what was about, nobody made me feel welcome, I'm immediately not feeling great about what happened. And when I leave, that's the thing that's in my mind. Whereas if I turn up to something where a lot of thought has been given to my experience, and when I walk in, I've been made to feel welcome, I knew where I was going, somebody greeted me with a smile on their face. Regardless of the content almost, I'm already in a different mindset in that space than I would have been. And I remember that feeling when I leave.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's really important, I think, when you are setting up an experience or an event or a meeting is that initial, just as you've said there, that initial welcome. And we're going to take a very short break from our themes now to do a little interim activity.
Ooh.
So in the middle of each podcast in season 2, we're going to have in the middle of our podcast a short, quick activity that you might be able to think about and use as in a team meeting, in an event, that's just a nice way to kind of break the ice. Don't like the words breaking the ice. And it's
So pretend we didn't say that.
And it's not a warm-up activity either, because we don't like the words.
We also didn't say that.
But this is a game that I've been playing for a couple of weeks now in some of our team meetings in Rossendale, and it's called Hurdle. It's online. It's called Hurdle.app. And what happens is I'm going to play you a snippet of a song now. Jamie fancies himself as a bit of a music connoisseur.
I can't believe you just set me up like that before we started.
And he's got 6 guesses to guess this song, and every time it's going to play a little bit more of the song, and you just type in your guesses, and it's a bit like Wordle if anyone's played that. Mm-hmm. So here we go. Okay,
so play along wherever you're listening from, and then get frustrated at me for how long this might take.
Yeah,
Come
so
on.
If you know this song, so you're only going to hear a second to start with.
Oh, nightmare. I have no concept whatsoever what that could be.
Okay, so we're going to skip guess 1 and play a bit longer.
Oh, I think I've got a guess.
Go on then.
I think that might be the start of Alicia Keys' New York. I think. Now, what you don't know if you're listening to this is Ken tested this on me twice early in the week, and I smashed it on the first guess every time, and this is the first one. I've no idea what it's going to be.
No, it's not that.
Oh no! Do you know what? Can I give up?
No, skip again.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 guesses left. A bit more now.
I'll tell you what, I can't believe it's done this to me.
No, it's alright.
I'll do the previous 2.
2 more.
Okay, how happy you are with this?
I'm so happy. He doesn't know anything about music, it turns out.
No.
Last one. This is your last chance. This is Death by Podcast as well.
It is, isn't it? Must be a quick activity this. Turns out if you don't know what it is. I know you're all shouting at home, you numpty. I haven't got a clue. Does this mean we'll get flagged, by the way, on YouTube or Spotify?
Oh, maybe. It was Alicia Keys, but it's
Oh.
If I Ain't Got You.
Oh, frustrating. Yeah. There you go. Hurdle is a team activity, not with one numpty who knows nothing about music. It's probably a really good, fun, engaging one.
Yeah, it's nice when everyone sits around, work together as a team.
And if this podcast doesn't get released and I have to re-record it, it's because we've been flagged.
Yeah. So, when you do intro activities or something just to get people to mingle or work together in a kind of light-hearted way, there's lots of good tips for that. I think things that are competitive sometimes can create some animosity in the team potentially. So things that people can do together that's comfortable, that's easy. So some quick do's and don'ts, I suppose. Do something short, easy, ideally relevant as well. Something that will help you get to know each other within your team and forge some relationships and connections. Personally, not a big fan of anything that involves physical contact. You know, massaging each other with a conga. They're major no-nos for me.
The reason Ken said them is because we've had an experience recently of exactly those things.
And anything that's going to be potentially embarrassing or create anxiety. Something that people are not going to want videoed and posted on social media. So those are some tips for when you're thinking about an activity.
Something that creates some kind of connection, that doesn't make people feel uncomfortable. And you literally don't have to say the words warm up, intro, or anything. You can just start a session like that. And again, that notion of create connection before content, I think is quite a nice thing to get into the mindset of. Before you get people into the thing you want to do, find a way for them to connect with each other. They're much more likely to want to contribute a little bit more once they've done so. Yeah,
so every podcast in this season, I'm going to be sharing just a little thing that you can do for 2 or 3 minutes, and hopefully there'll be some good ideas. And that takes us probably nicely into theme 3, which is designing out the barriers. So one of the reasons we do these kind of introduction activities is exactly that, so that people don't get put on the spot straight away in a business setting or with a hard question or a challenge, but can ease in and just take a breath, do something that's a little bit fun, take some of that anxiety and nervousness away. So that's one of the things we do. But talk to us, Jamie, a little bit about what do we mean by designing out the barriers? What does that look like, and any examples of that?
Yeah, sure. So, and really, this is we talked before about how creative engagement for us is evolving into something different, and this is a relatively new thing in our thinking. And really, it's almost the next step from the look, the sound, and the feel. Do you know what I mean? Because that's about the thing that you do want to create. And really, the barriers is about identifying the things that could potentially get in the way of that experience that you want people to have. And the idea being is, think about the audience, actually capture the perceived barriers on their behalf. And I know some people sometimes say, I find it quite hard to put myself into other people's shoes and think, but actually, everybody we work with, we're all human beings who kind of have the same things that make us feel like we're not quite sure about a thing. It's whether you're, like I said before, walking to an event where you don't know people, that's the same kind of feeling for everybody. Walking into new places, meeting new people, are all things that could be potential barriers. Big, long documents, things that you struggle to understand the language of, they're all barriers for all of us. It doesn't matter whether you're a resident or a corporate leader or whatever it would be. So that is really about, and most of this stuff is about, take some time, capture some perceived barriers, and then create some design ideas that remove those barriers for people. Because actually, we have a lot of the same barriers. It's easy to design those out. But for some of us, we also have some different barriers, and we'll come into some examples of that. And all this is doing is creating the best opportunity for somebody to have a good experience and therefore be able to contribute and help you achieve what it is you're trying to achieve. So let's do some quick examples of barriers that you might have. So content in itself can be a barrier. So we alluded to a little bit the Rosendale plan that we talked about a little while ago. A barrier for that and people wanting to read it would have been for it to be 60 or 70 pages. And if you think about most kind of public health plans and documents and things, they tend to be more like that than something relatively short. So recognising that actually, if you want people to read it, a success factor is I want people to read this and be interested. Well, one barrier is how long it might be. Well, then design that out. Set yourself a target. What would it look like if I only had 10 pages? I love, in creative engagement, I love setting arbitrary numbers. So what would it look like if I was only allowing myself 3 PowerPoint slides? How fundamentally different would my presentation be than the 20 slides that I would normally do? If I'm only allowing myself 10 pages for a big annual plan, it fundamentally focuses my mind on the stuff that is most important for people to get across. So content in itself can be that. I was part of a session the other day where I immediately wanted to go and join the design of that because somebody was about to they were designing a half-day governance and safeguarding event. And exactly that. Beautiful. So that is exactly the thing. So in Ken's mind there, he sat down, he thinks, well, okay, governance and safeguarding. So perceive the barrier that people have an initial, governance and safeguarding.
I'm thinking checklists, I'm thinking boring, I'm thinking policy.
So then you need to think about, okay, well if that is a perceived barrier for people, that before they've even arrived, they're not in the mindset to create a great experience, design that out. So you could do something in your prep comms that says, this event upcoming is going to be different to one we've done before. Come back to your arbitrary numbers. I asked the question how long the event is and guessed it was about 3 hours and they kind of smiled and nodded. Okay, what does it look like when you do it in an hour and a half? You know what I mean? How much more can you value other people's time? So that's content itself can be. And then we've talked a little about some of the more obvious barriers. Going to a new place, not knowing really what the thing is you're going to, not knowing people. Well then, catch that as a perceived barrier and then you design things out. Okay, how much effort did we put into doing a little walking map so that people knew exactly where we'd come? Did we include a little photograph of the building you're coming to looks like this?
Yeah. So
you're not increasing my anxiety before I've even walked in the building because I got a bit lost and now I'm late and I'm frantic.
I don't know where to park, all those types
all this stuff. All of this stuff is removing the barrier before they exist. Let's carry on that journey. You walk in, there's no one there smiling at you telling me to go, your anxiety's back up again. As opposed to, maybe not Jamie, you never want Jamie greeting you when you walk into a place. A Ken Massa, big smile on his face. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to take you through to where we're going.
Well, I was just about to say, I'm probably the person who stands kind of in the room a bit and sees you coming in quickly, looks away, which also you don't want.
So there's some really obvious things, and then we talked about the language you use. Here's a really simple engagement tool that I've just kind of started trying, and it's something silly, but again, it's just about thinking about little bits you can remove. So name tags that people wear, okay? So normally the name tags are those ones you can get printed up that are about 2 inches long and about half an inch high, and people write the name really small on it. So now if I want to know your name,
you have to stare at my chest.
I have to stare at your chest for an uncomfortable amount of time.
Which could be quite awkward.
I have to be stood next to you. You've come over smiling, I'm like, this guy knows me, I can't remember who he is. But actually, something really simple, we just got some big name stickers and big chunky markers. And the last event I did, everybody wrote in really big things what it was. And all that meant was I could sit across a room and recognise a name And so I didn't have a barrier about uncomfortableness, not knowing people. I wasn't staring at people's chests in an uncomfortable fashion for anybody.
Yeah.
Simple stuff like this, perceiving barriers, recognising stuff in other things you think, I'm not sure that works that well. There's another great tip. Sit in events and look at what's happening around you. Think about what you're feeling. What could I do that's better than this going forwards? And then easy stuff that we talked about. Don't cram agendas full. People do creative engagement, have been on our sessions, and you can tell that they don't think it applies to corporate board meetings. Whereas I'd say to anybody, if your corporate board meeting's got 16 points on an agenda, that group of extremely intelligent people are not discussing anything meaningful in that session. The passive recipients of information. A nice little message to think about is designed for contribution and not consumption.
Okay.
And that can fundamentally change your mindset in what you're trying to get across.
So just say that again. That feels like a good soundbite for people to ponder on.
So that's design. I'll get it wrong way around this time. Design for contribution and not consumption.
Okay, I like that. And that probably, so we've talked a bit about there in terms of all the kind of lead up, the introduction to the event, and of course what the stuff that happens within the event. Then, whether that's a meeting, whether it's a one-to-one discussion, whether it's an engagement event with communities, whether it's a larger kind of networking event, all of that stuff then, as you do the planning, as you think about success factors, as you think about barriers, as you think about the look, the sound, the feel, the things that happen then, are going to be really varied depending on what type of thing you're doing. And so we're not going to touch too much on those. And of course we're going to release this video series that'll go with our creative engagement toolkit, which will outline in more detail examples of things that you can do, things that you can try, tools you can use.
And I think it's exactly we'll have one that's on success factors, and we've got a nice template actually that we'll put in the show notes. Show notes, that's professional, wasn't it? We'll put in the show notes and link to the website and again a really simple thing. If you give people a template that has a certain amount of boxes on, people have to try and fill that box.
Yeah, sure.
So if you've got to find 3 types of value for your audience, you've got 3 boxes means you've got to do that. Sorry I interrupted you then because I'm excited by this topic.
So we're gonna wrap up a little bit. I'm sure there's lots more we want to share. If you could pick out, say, 3 things that you think are like the keys to understanding what creative engagement is and starting to practice some of those principles, what are some final thoughts that you'd like to kind of share as important bits and pieces?
So I'll share a few final thoughts, and then if it's okay, before we wrap up properly, I'll just bring in a thought that I've had recently around commitment devices.
Yeah,
that's something we've started doing. Yeah.
So let's do that first. Let's do commitment devices first. And then your top few points.
Okay. So this one is not necessarily currently part of creative engagement almost, but it's a way of. So a commitment device. So I've never been somebody who reads. Let's leave it as that.
Barely can, to be honest.
I've got some notes here. There's just a series of big bright pictures that I've drawn myself. But the idea of a commitment device, it's a book I was reading called Atomic Habits by a guy called James Clear. It's fascinating. I'll really enjoy it. But the idea of a commitment device is it's a way of locking yourself into a desired behaviour that you might not otherwise do.
Okay.
And the reason it came about was we're running these skill sharing sessions now. And obviously what I'm really mindful of is people have, you're part of training, skill sharing or whatever, and you have great intentions of actually doing something with it, and then you leave, and then your day's busy, and then you've got the kids pick up, and then your next day's back-to-back meetings, and then you're on a bit of annual leave, and before you know it, 2 weeks has passed and you've done nothing with it. Yeah. And so the idea of a commitment device is, what can you literally do right now that locks you into at least having to have one more conversation, or having to actually put something in place before you leave the room. So it's not about saying, when I will set up a meeting. It's about, why can't you open your laptop now, open a calendar and send an invite to somebody now that says we're going to talk about this thing. You've instantly created something that you have to willfully ignore the fact you've done that to not talk about it.
And massively increases the likelihood of that thing.
Absolutely, and it's this thing where, the public sector particularly has a habit of, we'll get round, we'll arrange something, we'll get together. It's like, well, do it now. So simple things of commitment devices, that one we've just done. Open a calendar, book out time with somebody. Message somebody and says to them, next time we get together, which is on Tuesday, let's arrange it now, we're going to talk about this thing. In front of a big group of people, say, at our next meeting, we're only allowing 3 PowerPoint slides each, and create that commitment and expectation for everybody. A real easy one, set reminders on Alexas or laptops or whatever to actually spend 10 minutes now to kind of reflect on a thing.
Yeah.
And maybe one more, which I tested with somebody at an event the other day and they weren't quite up for it. They weren't quite ready for it, which was tweet or share some outward facing comms that creates a commitment to everybody who kind of Twitter reaches.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So you might say, for example, coming back to that governance safeguarding event, a bold move would be to tweet out saying the next time you come to this it will be different than anything you've seen before. That's a big bold move, but as soon as you create that commitment, you've got to do something about it.
On a personal level, that works, doesn't it, as well in the same, if you really want to write a blog article or a report, if you email your colleagues to say, I'm going to have that report with you tomorrow, or you tweet to say, new blog dropping on my website tomorrow, then, like you say, there's that expectation there that will drive you to act.
And it's simple stuff, but actually I tried it in a session the other day, and it was the thing that almost connected them most. People would say, oh, we've agreed we're going to get together, and I pushed and went, no, sort it now, get your laptops out. And we know that something will happen now, and that was a fundamental difference. So it's a new thing I've started adding in, because I think it just helps us all. We know we want to do something different. This really helps it, makes it more likely that we're going to do it.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so that's commitment devices. So I think in summary, we picked up those 4 or 5 themes. So key points now for the audience to take away.
Okay, so success, not for you. Well, yes for you, but not just for you. Not just for you, but also for your audience. And then design something that meets the success factors. Think about the audience, what they may be feeling before the interaction, what experience you want them to have. Identify anything that might get in the way of that experience, and then capture some design ideas. And then that last point that we talked about then, the create a commitment device right now so you do something with it. Okay, so what's our commitment device going to be from this podcast? Well, we've already made one, which is, we've already said we're going to release some creative engagement kind of, like this little training video, not training, that's horrible, skill sharing videos, if you like. And so if we don't now, then what a mockery we are as people. So there's that commitment device. And I'm going to push you a bit further. and when can people expect those to land? They can expect them to land, or start to land, because I think we'll do them in little kind of, in the next couple of weeks, I think. Okay. I want to do one, see how that feels, see how long it takes, practice. There's a lot of stuff, practicing ourselves to have a go at this stuff. Yeah. And then release it, and then it might feel like one every week. Okay. So in June we should see the first segment of our skills sharing. Okay. That sounds. And then we're also going to create another commitment now by talking about what we might do in our next podcast. Cool. So this isn't a 1 episode long season. Well, we could get carried away there. Okay, so that sounds like a good recap of what we've learned so far and what we've talked about today. One of the things that I'm realising is just the depth of the learning that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years. It's so hard to cram all of that into what is now 33 minutes and counting. Yeah, we've missed our target. And so I'm really looking forward to those skills sharing events, but also there's lots of articles and things on our website as well. There's the creative engagement toolkit. There's the Look, the Sound, the Feel guide, which covers a lot of what we've talked about. Yes. So a lot of this stuff is available on the TaAF website, taaf.co.uk. And sorry, just one more. I'm currently exploring. So what we talked about today is the prep and the thinking and approach. I am looking at what does the next skill sharing session that I want to design look like. That says, how do you then turn that into a plan where you actually design or write a document or create an event. So I think there might be a part 2 to this at some point as well about the next steps. Okay. To wrap. Over to you. Okay, so well, I think you've wrapped most of it, to be honest. Like Ken said, we've tried to get quite a lot across in there. We do hope there's been some practical things that you could take away. Some literal activities, tools, hints and tips. And I've kind of come onto this thinking in the past is, if people just take one thing away and that changes something to do, that's massive. We always try and give it quite a range of stuff so that people can find something that they do connect with, because I appreciate not all of this is for everybody. But if people just take one thing away and change something, I think that's massive for us and it's massive for them and can fundamentally lead to some really great stuff, both for them and their audience and for what we're all trying to achieve together. Next podcast, do we have an idea what we're going to do it about? Well, I think no. I shared some ideas on WhatsApp, but I have no idea where they are. Okay. I think one of the things that we might talk about is we've been developing a model around
behaviour systems and places and kind of the way we piece work together. We've done a lot of good work on building and establishing networks in places, so we might do something around networks and some practical tips about how you could build a network. So if either of those two things sound interesting, and if anyone at all is listening to this podcast, then email us or get in touch or tweet us on @TaAF Talks. And
very good.
Yeah, do like that. And we'll take the audience's desire into what we do next.
Yeah, which will be 0, so we'll decide. There was actually one more, because you did send a good WhatsApp message. There was also something around the capturing of stuff and the evaluation of stuff.
Yeah, capturing learning. And we've got some really good practical, easy, anyone can use tools that we're using now to capture learning, both qualitative and quantitative. So that's kind of exciting too.
Yeah, and just to land a couple of names of things that might hook you in. So I think learning pods and ripple effect mapping and all the practical stuff we've started to try recently.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much. If me can reflect and think that this was anywhere near decent, and we've still got the old magic, we'll come back.
Old being the
We'll come back and do another episode. Thank you so much, by the way, to anybody who has listened to the past season and shared beautiful feedback and thoughts with us. We did actually hear some really nice stuff, and it does genuinely make us feel quite happy and proud when we see hundreds of people getting into the thousands across the full season have watched or downloaded or listened, which is absolutely fabulous. So on that note, I think we'll hand over to you, Ken, just to leave us all with a final little nugget of wisdom.
Thank you. So just reflecting on kind of rehashing a quote by Winston Churchill, I think, that says we shape the things we build, and that includes our experiences and connections and interactions with people, and thereafter they shape us. And so the experiences that we have together, the things that we build or create, can then have long-lasting effects on everyone who was involved in them, and they shape the way that we think and feel afterwards. So that's it. We shape the things we build, and thereafter they shape us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Right, okay. See you next time, folks.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.